Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at pre-season technical drills. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into the first part of this week's session, we're going to be focusing on a technical drill, which is focusing on a small pattern of play, focusing on our receiving skills, moving the ball quickly, timing of our movements, and then the execution of our passes. But before we get into it, let's have a look at how many players we're working with this week and the equipment that we'll be using. So in terms of players, we've got 12 players in this session, but if you have more or less players, we can just adapt it. If you have more players, we can start to add rotations into this drill. If you have less players, let's say you have 10 players, because we're splitting our players into two groups of 6, it can be two groups of 5, and it can just be one player in the middle, and we can speak in a second about how you can adapt that. In terms of the equipment, going to be focusing on using balls, bibs, cones, and then for this part of the session, if you've got poles or mannequins that you'd like to use to interpret the emphasis of more movement, okay, and getting away from the defender, that'd be great as well. But if you don't, you can just use cones. So in terms of the setup for this part of the session, we're going to have 25 yards of total depth. So from the start points into the middle areas, it's going to be 10 yards, and then 5 yards minimum in the middle. So you can make that a little bit bigger if you wanted to as well for these two players, an extra couple of yards. And then in terms of the width, okay, it's going to be 15 yards. So again, you're looking for it just to be in the middle of here. So 7 or 8 yards into the middle for the two central players. So we're trying to focus on first time passing, okay, but also being able to receive on the back foot and play quickly, okay. So the ball's basically going to go round in a triangle to come back and then get switched the other way. So it's a bit of an activation drill, but also we want to work on the tempo being high, okay, and the players getting used to lots of touches of the ball. So we're going to have two start points starting diagonally opposite. So we're going to have a ball here and a ball there. Now if you have 10 players and you've got two groups of 5, you just have one player in the middle, okay, and just one ball working at a time. So then when it gets switched, it just goes off the opposite way. But with us having 6 players, we can have 2 balls going. So the ball will start by going into the central player, okay, who can either position themselves, okay, to receive and play around the corner first time, or they can look to open out on the back foot and play into this player here, who again, it can be 2 decisions. This player can either open up and then slide it into space for this player to move on to and play first time, or they can open up, receive on the back foot, and then play into space, play back to the start, okay? So we're going in a triangle there, so play down, play back out, play back across, and then we go to the other side. Instantly, okay, that player will then look to play in, gets played out, gets played back, okay, and then gets played back to the other side to go again. So if we're starting from this side, it'll look like this, where it'll come in, go out, go there, and then go down. Okay, so these wide players are both getting a chance to switch in the play. So then it'll come in, come out, come wide, and then go back down. So again, we're focusing on those receiving skills, okay, timing of the movement to create space. And what we're doing by creating the space, so when this ball goes into this player here, if they open out and we pull into this space there, we can receive into feet, or we can then look to points to receive the ball in front and then play first time. We can even play this pass in front for the player to move on to and play into space. Okay, so it's adapting to the scenarios as well, adapting to different passes, adapting to different movements and touches. Okay, so the more confidence that the players get with it, the higher we want the tempo to be. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. Now moving into part 2 of this week's session, we're now moving into more of a small-sided game, okay, based scenario, but it's going to be focusing on keeping possession and switch and play. So you're going to split the group into 3 groups of 4, okay, or you can split them into pairs if you wanted to as well, and then just have 4 defenders in the middle who can rotate after the same amount of time. But you want to try and get 3 groups of 4, okay. So in terms of the setup, okay, we're going to go with 20 yards of depth, okay, so 10 yards in each box, 20 yards of width, and then this box in here is going to be quite small, okay. We want it to be quite tight so that the players have got to move the ball quickly, okay, to switch the play. So we're going to have the 4 yellows in the middle, and then all the other players are going to be split into groups. So let's say if you split in 3 groups before, you could have 4 red players here, so 2 and 2, and then the 4 blues, and then the 4 yellows. Whichever team loses the ball, okay, lose possession, can switch over. So we're focusing on the ball, trying to manoeuvre around quite quickly, okay? Both players in the box have to touch it before it switches, okay? And it's a 2v1 scenario. So once the ball is transferred from one box to another, the next defender goes in, okay? So the coach can play into here. This player looks to instantly close down. As soon as they've had the 2 passes, okay, they can look to switch the play quickly. Next player goes in, so it's kind of a rondo-based possession game, okay? Next player comes in, these players look to consistently move the ball, switch the play, okay, this player looks to move in. Again, this player drops back in, move the ball quickly, okay, because the area is quite tight, it gives them a better chance of winning the ball. We can then see it switch back to the opposite side. This player moves back in again, looking to win the ball, okay, gets switched across. This player moves in, so it's how quick the defenders can close down. Because they both got to touch the ball, when it comes back, they could pinch the ball. Goes back to the coach, and then what you'd see is that these 4 players, okay, would swap over, and then it would go again, okay, with these 4 defenders in the middle, okay. You could make a point system, maybe every time a team switches the play, they can get a point. And it could be that every time they split the defenders as well, or they can go over them or go through them, it could be a point as well. Because obviously they're in 3 groups of 4, it's hard to say every time they switch it, it can be a point. You could do every 2 switches for each team, every 3 switches for each team, so it entices them to keep moving that ball. So again, coach will play in, next player comes in, both players have got to touch the ball, okay, they can drop it off to each other, so focusing on that movement, okay, not being static, waiting for the ball. These players touch it again, okay, this player can come across, and look to switch the play, gets in there, okay, obviously these are the same colours on the board, switching that, keep moving the ball, okay, quickly, switching the play until then the ball is then won by the defenders. So you could even create a rule as well, if it becomes a bit too easy for the teams attacking, that whichever box they receive it from, they can't play into that box, so they've got to try and change the direction. So it could be after a certain amount of time, or if you don't feel like that's needed, that's fine, but that's just a progression that you can bring in to make it a little bit easier for the defenders and make the attackers think a little bit more, okay? But obviously, if the drill is working fine, you might not have to bring that in. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to part 3 of this week's session. Okay, now moving into part 3 of this week's session, we're now moving into a small-sided game-based scenario, okay, which is again focusing on trying to maintain possession, okay, and then when more players are added, as in more defenders, still having that composure and moving the ball quickly to avoid losing possession. So in terms of the setup, okay, in terms of the depth, you want to go 25 yards in each zone, okay, if it's 6v6, if it's less players as well, you can look to change that. And then in terms of the width, it just depends again on how many players that you've got. You can go 25 yards again, you can go 30, you can go 20. You might want to start off a little bit smaller and then increase it if need be. So it's going to be, the 2 groups are split into their 2 halves, okay? When the ball gets played into one team to start, 2 defenders, okay, will go in and close down. They've got to complete, the Blues then will have to complete 5 passes before the next defender comes in, okay? So we'll just do 5 passes quickly. 3, 4, 5. On that 5th pass, the next defender can come in, so it's a 6v3 scenario. So what we're focusing on is our movement, okay? So what we don't want is players playing off the same line, okay, here, and looking to pass the ball, and then the other players getting sucked in towards the ball, because then it makes it easy for the defenders to defend, okay? And the ball's just moving off the same line, okay? And players aren't turning out, or they're turning out and playing to the same way. It's easy for the players to read where passes are going to go, which makes it easier to intercept once they try and play out of pressure, because they're in a good position. What we want to see is having some height, width and depth, okay, and then players, okay, once they've received the ball and then played out, okay, so we could have this player plays into there, okay, and then they could look to move around this player, increase movement from the opposite side to play into, and then they could look to move out of space, okay, and we're seeing players just moving around more, okay, which makes it more difficult for defenders because they might try to follow as well, which creates more gaps. So when the ball gets played wide here now, okay, you can get players dropping in, okay, just even to occupy defenders, okay, players stretching the pitch, and then we can look to switch the play with their movement, okay, in between, as if we're trying to play through and play between the lines to receive. As more defenders come in, obviously it makes it harder and the ball's got to move quickly, okay, so again, we're focusing on that movement once we've played the ball, okay, so players can just look to interchange, okay, look to create space for the player on the ball by, after we've played the ball, moving out of that space that which we've been in, okay, to vacate if somebody's come into, to take the ball into, okay, to make it more difficult for the defenders as well, because we've got a player here on the ball and he's getting closed down, okay, and he plays the ball in here. If this player then moves away into space, okay, we open up that avenue of opening out and playing, okay, and the defenders, they might get sucked into this area, we leave the space there, so then eventually we might play the ball across, okay, and we go back across ourselves, okay, where the space has been vacated. So it's being able to recycle possession, okay, but at the same time, look to maintain it via our movement, okay, because if we're too static, it becomes too easy for the defenders to read the play, okay. If we just stand still and keep bopping the ball about, the defenders get more confidence to close it down, okay, and then it becomes harder for us to switch the play. Whereas after we've played the ball, if we continue to move, okay, we can get more options on the ball. It makes it harder for the defenders to read it, okay, we're moving the defenders about more, okay, into different positions, okay, instead of letting them be set and then look to press the ball. If the yellows win it back, okay, so we look to play a pass, they look to play the ball instantly into their team, otherwise, or they can look to just clear it, okay. If they win the ball back in there, okay, the blues can still look to pinch it back and carry the move on. So instantly you'll get two blues, okay, going into here. So we're spreading ourselves out. We're playing the passes, okay. Players are moving, all right. Looking to get on the ball. After the 5 passes, our next defender comes in. And again, we're doing the same thing. Players looking to drop in and win the ball and get on the ball as much as they can. So giving the players the confidence to receive it. And then continue to keep possession. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. Don't forget to head over to our website where you can sign up to view all of our exclusive content. And we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.